I'm David Hunt, and welcome to Bent TV. My guest tonight, oh, you're going to love her. She's absolutely incredible. Melbourne born, but Sydney based, although, that's debatable right this very moment. Uh, a playful visual artist known for her political statements. I've just got to make a couple of statements here. You'll get an idea of what she's all about. Signs like, I love this one, escaped refugees welcome here, or a tall ship that's flashed onto the side of the Sydney Opera House, the tall ship that Captain Cook came out on, with underneath it saying boat people. I love that. Or another sign on another occasion flashing into the sky where it says, beware of God. Too funny, too clever. In 2012, there was an exhibition at the Queensland Art Gallery called Miracles. I want to talk about that because I find it very powerful. Talking about powerful, Man Tango, we'll definitely talk about that. She ran a successful girls' night called Girl to Girl, and there was a newspaper article with her in a steam bath with other girls, and it was called Lesbian Storm Steamworks. Definitely got to talk about that. Her current exhibition is at ACMI in Federation Square, and it's called The Gods of Tiny Things. Deborah Kelly, welcome to Ben TV.
Thank you very much, David.
Now, just tell us your situation because uh, you're living in Sydney now, but you're not in Sydney as we record this. Where are you? What's happened?
Greetings from Jerrinja country. I'm actually speaking to you from Currarong on the south coast of New South Wales. I came here for a 2-day break on the 21st of June after I produced an enormous dance event with 100 children at the MCA. I came down here for a 2-day break to recover, and I got trapped here by the lockdown. So I'm lucky trapped, but still trapped.
Let's talk about you as a kid. Raised in Melbourne. Whereabouts? What part of the world?
When I was really, really little, and indeed where I was conceived, was Ackland Street in St Kilda. My parents ran a florist shop there. And then we moved around, and I ended up in Glen Waverley.
Did you enjoy it? Did you have fun at school?
I went to a Catholic girls' school called Sacre Coeur. There was plenty of fun and a lot of lovely young women. Um, but it was also a place where one could learn an undying enmity for the um, patriarchal misogyny of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, yeah, I could imagine. When did you realize that you might be attracted to girls? Was that there at school or did it come later?
I honestly had no idea. I was just a boy crazy girl, and um, but it's like boys just didn't turn out to be that amazing. Yeah, it was all a big surprise. Actually, I'll tell you how it really happened. I just had experimental sex with a local lesbian, and under a week later, one of my housemates, who was starting the new Outrage magazine, which began as a gay and lesbian magazine, he talked me into designing a cartoon strip for Outrage, for the first Outrage. And I was like, but I'm not, I don't even know if I'm a lesbian. But then I was kind of a public lesbian before I'd even made up my mind. And so, yeah, I published a number of cartoon strips, and they were totally autobiographical in the first 3 issues, I think, of Outrage when it first came out in 1983.
So where did the interest in art come? Was that at school or did that happen once you left school?
No, no, I was always totally into art at school, but I wasn't really able to go to art school. I studied law instead of art because I'm the first person in my family who ever finished school. And I got into law, so, had to do law. My dad was always sure that I could just do art on the side. Um, but it just became more and more important to my life. Although I guess as an artist, you know, I've managed to bring my creative life into a whole lot of realms. I mean, I worked in publishing for 30 years, and as you mentioned before, me and a group of other women set up a wonderful dance party club called the Caviar Club, actually, um, that we ran for 10 years. And it was a really cool club. We started it because we used to go to every single um, queer women's nightclub that was on in Melbourne because we were so young. We just went out dancing at least 5 nights a week. Can you imagine? Anyway, um, the dance clubs were so terrible in those days.
Yeah.
Terrible. And we'd end up night after night at this wonderful, beautiful cafe called Zakpina, which was just next door upstairs to Stalactites. I think Stalactites are still there. And there was this wonderful bohemian cafe next door and upstairs, slightly secret, like a big lounge room called Zakpina, which means wild woman. And they played Rembetika music and hosted us very young, complaining lesbians whinging about how totally crummy lesbian nightlife was. We complained ourselves into a complete corner where we ended up having to acknowledge that we couldn't do any worse than what was on offer. So we had to start our own nightclub.
Yeah, brilliant. Uh, and the political life that your art, like, comes in and out of all the time. What spurred you on? Was it studying law, or you just really had a real strong conscience?
Do you know what? I think it's really to do with spending 13 years in a Catholic convent school where they are continually talking to you about justice and exhibiting injustice. It was really to do with just seeing out and out injustice in action perpetrated by the Catholic Church against women in particular.
And oh yes, exactly. In those days in particular, and it's not too much better now, actually. So, did you finish law, or did you realise you had another calling?
I actually ran away to Spain after 1 year of studying law, and then I never went back to law. Um, and I lived in Spain for a while and had a whole other life in a whole other language.
And did the art come out there?
I no, not at all. Actually, I was an English teacher, and I hung around with a whole lot of other, all kind of outcast people, and had a very strange life. Actually, I couldn't do maths, and I couldn't budget to save my life, and in Spain in those days, you got paid once a month, right? But I couldn't budget. So for a week, we just lived high on the hog. I took everybody out for dinner. We just had everything we wanted. And then for 3 weeks, we were like, oh, uh oh, now what are we going to eat? Um, I really remember being chased down the Fuencarral by my poor landlord, trying to get the rent off us. But we were like, well, we spent the rent last week. I don't know, what's your problem?
So, what brought you back to Australia?
Dire poverty.
What? Come on, tell us. How did the art start? Where did this? Because you're such a prolific artist, and your mind is so beautiful. What you're creating. When did it start? And if it wasn't in Spain, one of the most artistic countries in the world.
I wasn't making art really when I lived in Spain, but I certainly camped out overnight with my housemate so that we could be the first people in Spain to see Pablo Picasso's great work, Guernica, which had been kept in America for 40 years. And it was returned to Spain, and they built this enormous exhibition at the Prado
Yeah.
in Madrid. and we camped out so that we could be the first people to see it in its return. So, and it was so remarkable an experience um, to see it surrounded by weeping Spanish people. Actually, it was just devastatingly moving, and I guess that must have really influenced me. I had started doing some cartoon work for political organizations before I went to Spain. But when I came back, I I did that a lot more. I was a cartoonist. I published in like every gay and lesbian and left wing and trade union and feminist and environmental publication, maybe in the whole country. I published maybe 200 cartoon works. Um, And I learned to be a graphic designer by accident at that time, and so I was doing a little tiny bit of art on the side, but mainly I was a young feminist cartoonist, and there weren't very many, so we got a lot of attention, and the cartoonists became very when we found each other, which wasn't easy given that Google hadn't been invented, um, we became a kind of small gang of feminist cartoonists, which was so fun. That little bit of solidarity. I'm still friends with some of those women. Trudy Clutterbuck, Jo Waite, who's still working a lot, doing magnificent drawings in Melbourne and of Melbourne in particular. Um, and Trudy Clutterbuck is primarily a psychotherapist now. And then Judy Horacek came along, and there was Kaz Cook too. So we were a pretty good gang. Um,
Yeah.
we did quite a few cool things together, had cartoon exhibitions and stuff. But how I turned into an actual contemporary artist, I often think, well, how did that happen? It's like most of my life I've been in the back seat of a speeding car. I don't know where it's going or who's driving. But, because I certainly didn't set out to have a career as an artist, but here I am.
Yeah, here you are. So you didn't do any formal study?
I didn't. Although just a few years ago, in a great act of queer solidarity, the wonderful, gay artist Gary Carsley, who worked at that time at, um, what was COFA, the College of Fine Arts, and now has the unwieldy name of the University of New South Wales Art and Design, I think it is. Yeah. He talked me into coming and doing a master's degree there, an MFA by research, which means you get to write a thesis about your own work, um, properly referenced, and make a whole great big body of work. And that was an amazing experience. I mean, I really did wish to be able to go to lectures and learn things from other people, but my master's degree, I had to figure out how to contextualize my work in the history of contemporary art. And I mean, I really learnt to write a good artist statement.
Did you get permission to put the tall ship on the side of the opera house with boat people underneath it, or did you cheekily just
And
do
I
that?
just did that. We gave ourselves permission. I must say, I don't think it occurred to me or any of us that we needed permission. I mean, we didn't ask anybody, but I don't think we really thought gonna trouble anyone. But it did trouble people.
Was there trouble for you? Like, did you have to explain yourself?
The guards came and said, "What do you think you're doing?" And we said, "We're turning the opera house into a sign." And they said, "This is public space." And we said, "Well, we are the public," which is a killer response, I think. Um, and they said, "You actually can't do this." And then they made it very hard for us to continue. But no, they didn't arrest us or call the cops or anything. They did make us go away though.
Now, I've got to mention now about Tank Man Tango. explain to our viewers what that is because I think this is one of the most amazing things that you've done.
Thank you. Just have to think of the short way to tell you this because it's a pretty complex work. So I met a young woman from Shanghai when I was at a conference in um, Amsterdam, and she heard me talk about my work, and she really hated it. And she said, "Why don't you talk about some properly repressive regime instead of what you are doing, which is such a waste of time?" And I said, "Well, like who?" And she said, "Well, you should talk about America as an oppressive regime." And I went, "Really? Okay, well, like, what about China?" And she said, "In what way is China repressive?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, Tiananmen Square." And she said, "Everyone in China knows that Tiananmen Square did not happen. That
Whoa.
it was concocted by the Americans to make China look bad. It was all done with Photoshop." And I mean, this is just one person talking to me about this, but she had such bravado and confidence. It really made me think, wow, is that even possible? And I went back and looked really closely at a lot of the video traces of what happened at Tiananmen Square. And as I was looking at it, I thought, well, actually, Photoshop didn't even exist then. So it
No.
can't be concocted. But I was really, really struck with the incredible efficacy with which the regime has erased public memory in this way, uh, and and convinced a generation of people that such a momentous event simply didn't happen. Um, and because because I've been really involved around the time of Tiananmen Square, I had been involved in the struggle for Australia to recognise the violence of its occupation of um, the existing civilization that was here. Um, and so I have been involved with, tens of hundreds of thousands of other people fighting our government about the way that history is told here. And so when the Chinese students were doing exactly the same, fighting their government about the way history is being told, their own history, um, they were very much allied to what we were doing. We were allied to what they were doing. Um, and remember in 1989 when Tiananmen Square happened, remember when Bob Hawke went on television to talk about what had happened, the tanks rolling over the students, and he burst into tears and he couldn't stop crying, and it felt like it was repeated over and over on every television station, close-ups of Bob Hawke sobbing, and yet kind of devastatingly human grief for those students. And remember, he said during that speech, clearly without discussing it with Cabinet, that all the Chinese students currently studying in Australia could now stay. So we became enormously more Chinese. And so I got to know lots of people who are here because of Tiananmen. And so then, so many years later, to meet somebody who could tell me with so much confidence that it had, in fact, not happened at all, um, really was very stilled me, stopped my heart for a moment. And as I looked at the documentation that I mentioned, and I watched the tanks rolling down Tiananmen Square after the massacre, and that guy, Tank Man, stopping them, and the tank's trying to get around him, and him stopping them, and he steps up on the tank, and he steps back down, and he shakes his bags at them. I thought, that guy is dancing. He's dancing with the tank. Anyway, so I commissioned a choreographer to look as closely as I had at the steps that he took. And she, Jane McKernan, made it into a danceable choreography. My friend Tate Kim Pok danced it. And we filmed instructional videos in 4 languages that are still up on YouTube. If you just Google Man Tango, you'll find them in English, Cantonese, German, and Mandarin. And on that day, the 20th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, people performed that dance together as a vigil, made their bodies a monument, a moving monument, a dancing monument, and took up space in public sites in cities all around the world. But not
Very
in China.
powerful. But not in China, because they don't believe it happened. Yeah. Unbelievable. Thank you
Well,
for that
can you
story.
imagine people doing that?
Oh, God. It's and the fact is that so many people were killed, or they're in prison. They'd be older people now in prison still to this day. Very sad stuff. Very sad. Let's talk about an exhibition you did at Queensland Art Gallery in 2012 called The Miracles. That really caught my eye. Explain to people it's 37 photographic portraits that you staged. Is that right?
That is right. And similarly, it's got a long story behind it. So let me see if I can just tell you the quick version of this one. So the miracles, as you say, it's 37 performed portraits, all in round frames. That's why I was admiring the round frames on your wall, because I searched so hard for the round frames that the miracles are framed in, that it wore a groove in my brain. And now, if I ever see a round frame, I have to buy it because it was so hard to find them.
But what are you going to do with them now, though? Because will you ever use
Something,
them again?
something.
Something.
I love round frames. I came to love them.
Yeah.
So the pictures are, this is a work that partly kind of takes the words out of the Pope's mouth, the old Pope, and twists them to my needs. So the old Pope said repeatedly quite rude and dismissive things about queer families, specifically families with children that they have made through artificial reproductive technologies like IVF. And as he kept saying those things, it just really dawned on me that IVF results in a miracle birth. And that technically, I mean, inside heteropatriarchy, you could say that in some instances, IVF results in a virgin birth, like a literal virgin birth, if you use heterosexual sex as your, primal side of sex. So that IVF was actually kind of an immaculate conception, and that this was a pretty cool way to turn around that attempt to be insulting and dismissive of our families and to reclaim that. So, and I spent 13 years in a convent school, and I just actually love Renaissance religious painting, especially Holy Family painting. So I wanted the works to have a sense of holiness, which is a theme in my work, you'll find. Um, and so I wanted to pose the people after those Renaissance Holy Family paintings. But then I had a brainwave, and I think this is why I especially love that work and why I have thought it was my best work. Um, Besides the incredible families who are so beautiful, um, as, and so luminous, and especially the babies, they're like little lamps. The brainwave that I had was that I didn't want to get the people to pose just after any old Renaissance Holy Family painting, but those Holy Family paintings which are disputed, of which there are many. So, for instance, there's one in the Art Gallery of New South Wales, which is a copy of a Raphael, the Madonna della Sedia. And so I used that copy, that inauthentic one, the one that has been argued over, as the model of all 37 of the photographic portraits, because that argument, the disputation over authenticity, seemed to me to chime very well with the status of those families themselves. So the people came and dressed up and were very dignified and beautiful, and the babies were actually, some of them were outright monsters. Um, but for this we have Photoshop, so so they're very, very doctored photographs, very much kind of collages, photographic collages. Some of them are really beautiful, and I really love this work. The final thing to tell you about it, though, is that they are all framed in antique round wooden frames, because a round frame is the kind of sign in Italian Renaissance painting for the domestic devotional scene. And so I really wanted to suggest that these miracles, like they actually are miracles, are all around us, and that
Mm.
they're a miracle we can be devoted to in our own homes and in our families.
Let's talk about the MCA exhibition that is supposed to be now at the Sydney Opera House, but you're not sure what's going to happen there because of the COVID lockdown. But just to explain to it, it was MCA, which looks across that part of the harbour to the Opera House, a fantastic gallery in Sydney. What is that exhibition?
Well, I was part of this great big show called The National, but I had a big, large section of it because the work I'm making is so enormous. After the poor curator commissioned me, it got more and more enormous. So my work, which was installed at the MCA, is part of a big, long, ongoing traveling work called Creation, which is the proof, I guess, that I am founding a queer, insurrectionary science fiction, climate change religion. And the religion has a whole lot of artifacts and um, beliefs and mysteries and costumes and headdresses and a magnificent liturgy at its heart, written by S.J. Norman. And then I commissioned the wonderful Sydney dance floor guru Stereogamous to turn the liturgy into a banging disco anthem. So there's a disco anthem, there's kind of hymns, or if not hymns, hers. Um, I commissioned a number of poets around the country to write poetic responses to the liturgy, and those poetic responses are being turned into songs. Um, and you can learn the songs. There are karaoke videos that we've made of the first 3 songs. You can find them all on the creationtheproject.com website. There are holy cards that I'm selling to raise money for the book of creation that I'm planning to publish next year in association with the Griffith University Art Museum.
you're an incredible artist, as in those cards that you just held up. They're magnificent, and you're not professionally trained. You're like there must be something in your brain that can trigger um, know how to paint that way. Because I couldn't do it. I'd have no idea how to do it.
I could teach you though.
Or could you?
Yeah,
I don't reckon
I
you can.
run I run collage workshops. I've run them all over the world. And people always walk in going, I can't do this. I'm going to be terrible. And by the end of the workshop, they're like, check me out. Check me out.
Okay. Okay. Now we've just got to talk because hopefully it will open before it closes. Well, it was open for a little moment at ACMI here in Fed Square right now. The Gods of Tiny Things. Now this is something quite different for you, isn't it? It's at ACMI, which means it's animated piece. Describe it to our viewers.
Okay. I should tell you first, though, that I've made a number of animations. And this is
Ah, have you?
yeah, I think that's my fifth. Used to just make these still collage works. And I had a whole lot of them, 37, I think. I had them under the bed. And I told my girlfriend, I think I can hear them rustling. It became clear to me that I needed to animate my paper collages. And so that's mainly what I've done. I've made my paper collages. Finally, uh, they get to dance and rub up against each other and have sex and eat each other. And fundamentally, that is the tale of all of my animations.
And it's in a particular gallery. It's the only piece in the gallery, and you walk around it. Is that right?
You're kind of immersed in it. It's on these two giant screens that are perpendicular, and then they built this beautiful shiny floor so that it reflects both on the both those screens and then onto this whole hemispherical floor, so that you can be really right inside it, like you're in a kaleidoscope full
Wow.
of dancing beings who are having sex and eating each other.
Have you actually been here in Melbourne to see it, or have you been in lockdown since this exhibition?
One minute I'm talking to the ACME event organizer about the catering company who's going to be doing the opening, and the next minute there's no opening at all.
Well,
It did open, but there wasn't an opening. Um, and it was open. I mean, CACME worked so hard to make it so beautiful. But then I had to do the install over FaceTime with them, which was frankly crappy. Um, And they had it open, I think, for 8 whole days, I think, before it closed. And I just really very much hope it will open again,
mm.
because that work, The Gods of Tiny Things, is a collaborative paper collage work. So all these different people came and worked with me, and we made all these different beings and landscapes, and I set them to play with each other.
It sounds fantastic. I unfortunately didn't see it before it closed down, so hopefully I will see it when it reopens. Deborah, Deborah, it's been such an honour to talk to you and there's so many more areas that we could get stuck into, but we've run out of time. So, Deborah Kelly, thank you so much for talking to us on Bent TV. It's been an absolute honour chatting with you.
Thank you so much. It's so kind of you to say.
Thank you for watching Bent TV. I'm David Hunt, and we'll see you again real soon.